Imagine you are looking into a mirror, but the face looking back isn't yours. It belongs to a stranger, a version of you designed specifically to be loved, feared, and respected by the people you need to control. For Catherine the Great, this wasn't just a thought. It was her entire life. She arrived in Russia as a young, naive German girl named Sophie. But she quickly realized that if she wanted to rule, her original personality was a weakness. To survive, she didn't just play a part. She completely changed who she was. She threw away her old name, her religion, her language, and her past. She became an empty shell that she filled with exactly what the Russian court, and later the world, wanted to see. She realized early on that being yourself is a luxury, and she was in the business of absolute power, where what matters isn't who you really are, but who others believe you to be. She treated her past like a costume that could be taken off and thrown away whenever it helped her get what she wanted. While history books focus on her land grabs and wars, the real story of Catherine is her ability to become whoever she needed to be. Most people have a real self, a set of beliefs and feelings that stay the same. Catherine didn't. She was like a chameleon. She was a master at tricking famous thinkers. She wrote letters to smart people like Voltaire and Diderot, not because she needed their advice, but because she wanted them to tell the world how great she was. She understood that if she controlled the story of being a smart, fair queen, she could stop anyone from criticizing her. She brought in new, modern ideas just to make sure that anyone who tried to stop her looked like they were stuck in the past. She spent years building a version of herself that was both modern and powerful, which kept her enemies confused. She didn't just rule Russia. She turned it into a stage show, making her next move impossible to guess because she didn't act like a normal person. She used the intelligence of others to protect her own rule. Think about the night she took the throne. It wasn't a sudden, messy fight. It was a long, carefully planned project. She played the part of the ignored, unhappy wife to her husband, Peter III, while secretly learning the weaknesses of every important person in the court. She was a master of planning ahead. She knew exactly what the army leaders were afraid of and what the church wanted. She spent years making friends, whispering in halls and acting like a victim of her husband's bad leadership. When the time came, she didn't just start a riot. She took power in a way that made it feel like it was meant to happen, even to the people she was betraying. By the time the guards swore they would follow her, she had already convinced them that she was the only person who could save Russia. She wasn't just stealing a throne. She was rewriting the story of that night while it was still happening. She understood that to take power, you don't fight the system. You become exactly what the system is crying out for. She was the shadow that became the leader. Think about the favorites she kept around her. Unlike the leaders of other countries who kept their inner circle scared, Catherine's favorites were treated like stars in her own show. She managed them like an artist managing a gallery. She gave them huge amounts of money and power, and as long as they acted like a perfect reflection of her glory, they were safe. But the moment they became too ambitious or stopped being useful, she didn't get angry or kill them. She just replaced them. She swapped them out for a new person, using the same calm, cold, and quiet efficiency. It was a way of treating people like tools that was actually scarier than using violence. It showed that to Catherine, a human connection wasn't a real bond. It was something that wore out over time. She treated men as tools to help her get what she wanted, putting them where they would make her look better, and getting rid of them the second they stopped doing their job correctly. She was incredibly good at keeping a calm, happy face in public while ordering the most brutal parts of building an empire. Whether it was taking over new land or crushing a rebellion, Catherine always kept the look of a modern, fair ruler. This took a lot of mental work. The ability to keep two different versions of reality in her head at the same time. She had to believe she was a fair, smart leader while signing orders to hurt people. She didn't see these as opposite things. She saw them as different steps to one goal, keeping her throne safe and famous. She was the boss of her own reality, and anything that didn't fit her plan, whether it was a person, a belief, or a truth, was simply thrown away. She lived inside a fortress of her own creation, where the real world was only useful if it could be shaped into what she wanted. The mental cost of living like this is often ignored, but you can see it in how she worried about her legacy. She didn't just want to rule, she wanted to write the history books herself. She spent her final years obsessively trying to control how the world would remember her, paying people to write nice things and cleaning out the records to make sure Sophie stayed buried forever. She was so afraid that the truth would leak out that she spent her last days working harder than ever to hide it. She was, in short, a prisoner of her own performance. By never allowing herself to be real, she lost the chance to ever truly relax. Every talk was a calculation. Every smile was a trick. Every bit of free time was just practice. She had become so good at playing the great that the real human behind the title had disappeared years ago. If Catherine the Great went to see a modern therapist today, they wouldn't say she was just paranoid. They would say she had a personality disorder where you disconnect from your true self. She lived in a world of constant pretending. She didn't just have a brand, she was the brand. She didn't have a stable sense of who she was because she had traded her internal world to make sure her outside power was perfect. She was a woman who built an empire by erasing herself, leaving behind a crown and a legacy, but nothing where a real human heart should be. She could walk through her palace and only see reflections of her own power, ignoring the real people who lived and died for her. It is a mental state that takes total focus, a life spent entirely away from yourself. She wasn't a woman who had power. She was a woman who became power, losing her own humanity to better fit the role of a perfect ruler. In the end, that is the true warning of Catherine the Great. She shows us that when you turn your life into a performance for power, you might win the applause of the world, but you'll be playing to an empty room because the one person you were supposed to be, yourself, vanished long ago. She sits on the throne of history, a queen who conquered everything, yet left behind nothing of herself. The show is over. The mirror is empty. She remains the ultimate warning for those who try to build empires out of their own image. The tragedy of her life wasn't that she didn't get what she wanted, but that she got it at the cost of her own existence. When we study her, We are not studying a human being. We are studying the cold, brilliant, and ultimately empty shell of a life lived entirely for the sake of an image. And in that, she achieved the ultimate victory and the ultimate loss. There was no Catherine. There was only the reflection of an empire. And when the empire fell, the mirror shattered, leaving behind nothing but the cold, hard, and silent truth of her absolute disappearance. I'm Dark Throne Minds. Every week we go inside the minds of history's most powerful, most dangerous, and most psychologically fascinating figures. Subscribe, turn on notifications. The history books left out the best parts. We'll find them.